What's up, everyone? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I interview neuroscientist Dr. Allison Brager. Dr. Allison is a researcher of sleep and recovery, and she was also a D1 track and field athlete as well as a multiple-time CrossFit Games team athlete. In this show, we dive deep into the science of sleep and recovery, how alcohol and other drugs affect that sleep and recovery, and more. Before we get started, if you're a regular listener of this podcast and you haven't done so already, I would really appreciate it if you put this show on pause, spend the next 90 seconds leaving me a review on iTunes. Enjoy the show. What's up, everyone? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Allison Brager, neuroscientist, sleep researcher. Doc, how are you?
I am doing fabulous. How about you?
Couldn't be better. It's starting to get fall over here in Texas. It's perfect weather for about 2 weeks, and then it'll be cold for a little bit. You're headed to San Diego right now, which I'm sure is going to be perfect as always.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't wait. We've had quite a bit of fall, and it's like 40 degrees in the morning, so it's not very comfortable at this point right now.
Right. So why don't we start out by telling everyone a little bit about your background and what your research is based on? Sure.
I've been an athlete my entire life. Grew up doing track and field, gymnastics, and in college I specialized in the heptathlon, pole vault, hurdles, pretty much all the field events. I have always tried to practice what I preach, which is to get enough sleep. I noticed early on in high school, whenever I was sleeping less than 8 hours, I had a really difficult time at gymnastics the next day. I was a two-sport athlete year-round, so I was training about 4 to 6 hours a day. And so this early interest in sleep carried on into college. I went to Brown University, and I was fortunate enough to meet this woman named Mary Carskadden, and she actually is a world-renowned scientist. She may actually get the Nobel Prize someday for discovering that the natural biological clock of teenagers naturally delays itself as teenagers go through puberty. So I was fortunate enough to work in her lab.
Real quick, what does that mean exactly?
So we have these like biological tendencies to go to bed, around 10 or 11 at night. But one of the things that happens when you're a teenager and you're going through all the stages of puberty, when you're 13, progressing all the way to 17, is that your tendency to go to bed is later than 11 p.m. So it's midnight, it's 1 a.m. You may have seen in the media that a lot of schools are trying to delay school start times, and it's all because of this idea that teenagers just can't biologically and physically go to bed at a reasonable hour.
Right. Couple that with like what their actual behavior of using their phones and computers until 2 a.m.
Right. Exactly. So that's the interesting spin on her research now, because when she started this work 25 years ago, technology wasn't an issue. And we've known since then in our research area that bright light, especially light like blue light emitted from phones, is the worst type of light possible for our natural sleep rhythms. So it'll be interesting over the years how she changes her studies and what we find now that technology is introduced. But anyway, long story short, I was always told to, plan your career around your lifestyle, not your lifestyle around your career. I had always loved science, obviously science of exercise, science of sleep. So I went to graduate school and I focused on the genetics of sleep and exercise and animal models. So I worked with mice and hamsters, and we screened them for certain sleep behaviors, and actually we did a little bit of addiction work And then we would go back and look at what their genetic environment looked like. And then we would manipulate their genetic environment to see if we can make them even more susceptible or less susceptible to sleep problems and drug addiction. So after that, I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I was doing my neuroscience fellowship there. And I was there for 5 years, did very similar work. Actually, I was looking more at genes in skeletal muscle and how that could help feed into how animals recover from sleep deprivation. And about a year ago, I got in contact with somebody at the Department of Defense and the Army at a conference. And here I am doing very similar work for the Department of Defense and the Army, looking at what can possibly make soldiers resilient and less susceptible to stress and sleep deprivation.
Amazing. A real quick tangent. Have
Sure.
you ever seen there's a cartoon YouTube series of I think it's rats on cocaine?
Oh yeah, I've
Were you behind that?
Well, I've never worked with rats in cocaine, but I've definitely worked with mice in cocaine, and I have several personal videos on my iPhone of it.
Nice.
I save those for cocktail parties if I want to, appear cooler and all that.
Yeah. Are you married or anything?
No, I am not.
Okay. I was gonna make a joke like your partner's like, oh, the mice on cocaine again.
No.
Okay.
Maybe that's why I'm single.
That's right. Excuse me. Okay, let's dive into it a little bit. So, I've heard on a couple interviews that you've done of you talking about non-REM sleep and how important that is. Can you talk about non-REM sleep and what it is and why it is important?
Sure. So there's 2 stages of sleep at night. There's non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep is typically the sleep people know of because that's the state of sleep when we're dreaming. But non-rapid eye movement sleep is actually what most of a nightly sleep episode is comprised of. So it makes up about 90% of total sleep. And it's typically favored, or I guess you could say most expressed, in the early parts of the night. And for athletes, it is incredibly important for recovery. During non-REM sleep, that's actually what triggers the release of anabolic hormones. So testosterone, growth hormone, insulin growth factors. You release little pockets of those hormones throughout the day, but you get the primary release of those hormones at night when you're sleeping. And the release of all those anabolic hormones is triggered by non-REM sleep. There was a longitudinal study done about 20 years ago where they actually looked at kids who didn't really have a lot of sleep, and they measured them over time. And these kids were going through puberty at the time, and they found that kids who slept less actually had stunted growth. So, that's like one of a few studies on this subject, but there at least is a correlation between growth during puberty and amounts of nightly sleep. But yeah, it's incredibly important for athletes.
So if it sounds like one of the biggest benefits is the release of all of these hormones. What is the benefit of REM sleep?
REM sleep is used actually for learning and memory. That's been shown over and over again for the past 15 years, mostly by work out of Harvard and Berkeley. We have a lot of REM sleep in the early parts of the morning. There's a reason for that. REM sleep is typically favored when your core body temperature is at its lowest. And you also have a lot of REM sleep if you choose to nap in the middle of the day. Also because we have a dip or a drop in our core body temperature in the middle of the day. And one of the things these studies have found is that the brain filters out unnecessary information and keeps necessary information during REM sleep. They've measured this in real time with electrode hookups, having subjects sleep or nap inside a neuroimaging machine. And it's not just like declarative memory, so like memory of facts and events and, recalling things from throughout the day. It's all types of memory. So even motor memory. So any type of motor skill that you've learned that day or the day prior, REM sleep can help you retain that skill and then perform that skill even better the next time.
Mm-hmm. So can you speak a little bit about the optimal time people should be sleeping, and if there are different prescriptions, what is best for who?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I like to emphasize is it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So you could have 8 hours of really crappy sleep, and the person who sleeps 6 hours but has phenomenal sleep is way better off. And a lot of that has to do with your natural biology and when you are going to sleep. So earlier I mentioned that we have these fluctuations in our core body temperature throughout the day and throughout the night. Anytime our core body temperature drops, that is when sleep is favored. So as soon as our temp starts to drop, the brain starts preparing itself to be asleep. And the body has this craving or need to want to be to sleep or want to sleep. So, when you're talking about time windows for sleeping, the optimal time for best quality sleep would be between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Largely because during that time, your core body temperature is at its lowest point throughout the 24 hours.
Okay.
So it's
And is there? I know a lot of your research now is looking for people that do well with sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And are there civilians that can say get tested, and if they have this gene, they know they can get less sleep and be just as healthy as others? Does that make sense?
So it is, of course, very complicated. It's a balance between nature and nurture. But yes, we're discovering through these big genetic studies of analyzing blood and spit samples for certain DNA markers. We're discovering that there are certain genes where somebody can sleep deprive themselves, pull an all-nighter, maybe get 4 hours of sleep instead of 8 hours across a few days. Those people bounce back really quickly from sleep deprivation, meaning they don't need to recover the sleep that they've lost. And they also have little decreases or compromises in their performance under sleep deprivation. For the military, that is huge, and that is what we are most interested in. We are interested in finding soldiers who can perform just as well while sleep deprived than the average person. And that's just not just, in areas of like motor performance or like reaction time, but, emotional reactivity too, like how well you get along with your unit. Do you blow up at them? Are you, an emotionally balanced person?
Mm-hmm. Now, I know y'all are in the middle of this research. Have you identified how to test for these types of things yet?
Well, the approach in science for doing this right now is pretty standard, regardless if you're doing military science or if you're just at a university doing, answering the same types of questions. It's no different than what many people have done, which is to send their spit to 23andMe, which is a genetic testing company based out of California. And there's a group of geneticists and molecular biologists there who essentially screen your DNA and look at every single gene in your genome and create these confidence ratings in terms of how different your gene is from the general population. Mm-hmm. It's all very sophisticated, and it's way more than than I even comprehend. But it definitely takes a team of experts and a team of scientists in order to do this type of stuff. But the results are pretty cool and pretty foretelling. At this point, I recommend that every athlete get genotyped. It will do wonders in terms of figuring out how you need to train, when you need to train, how much you should train, and what you should be training. To use myself as an example, I was completely blown away by my genetic results of my muscle makeup. So, in college, I said I was track and field. I've always regarded myself as a sprinter, as a power athlete. But one of the things I've noticed since starting CrossFit, especially like games training CrossFit, is that I can go for a really long time and I do really, really well on hero workouts, even if I'm like not properly fueled or anything. And it turned out from my 23andMe profile that there's a reason for that. Apparently my muscle makeup is not that of a sprinter, even though I was a, D1 college sprinter. But, so, like having that information really helped me to transform my training and to, focus on, areas that I thought were weaknesses, but were actually strengths.
Gotcha. What does that testing cost?
It used to be about $100. I think it's a little bit more now because, general economics, the demand's high, so they raised the price some. But it's not more than
not thousands of dollars.
Oh,
so
no.
That's a reasonable thing for serious athletes to do, for sure.
Yeah. At the very most, it's probably $200. And apparently there is one now. I think it's called FitGene. It's the same thing as 23andMe, except it focuses primarily on athletics. 23andMe focuses primarily on disease. That's actually why I did it, is because I have a really strong family history of Alzheimer's. And my cousin got genotyped and she didn't have this mutation. It's called the ApoE4 mutation, which is the most common cause of Alzheimer's in Eastern European populations, which is my entire family.
Wow.
And it turned out that she didn't have it and I don't have it. So that was my primary reason for getting genotype. But then the more I looked through the results and especially focused on like results of performance and exercise physiology, that's when I discovered all these nuances of my, genetic makeup and biology that I've tried to play around with in my life with training and lifestyle.
Right. Awesome. Can you construct the kind of perfect night of sleep, including ritual?
Yeah. Obviously, minimize the phones right before bed. I talked about that prior with bright light. So bright light, blue light, it actively suppresses the release of melatonin. So typically around 8 p.m., 9 p.m., our body starts to prepare itself for sleep. Like I said, our core body temperature starts dropping. And so this release of this hormone is triggered. If you're on your phone or on the computer watching TV, which is probably the worst habit that most people in America have, if you're doing any type of technology-related activity, that will actively suppress your release of melatonin and prevent you from getting to sleep quickly as well as staying asleep. So again, minimize technology. Taking a hot shower actually helps. Just, stimulate blood flow. That also can prepare the body for entering sleep. As athletes, I would highly recommend taking zinc and magnesium. Those are two minerals that most athletes are highly deficient of, and you need, some type of supplementation in order to keep up with the training and to keep the process of recovery going. Other than that, I guess I don't know if you've come across any of my blog posts about sleeping naked. That there's no empirical test for that, but that might help too. Hypothetically, it could help because clothes hug you when you're sleeping, and they raise your core body temperature. So if you don't have anything that's providing insulation, your core body temperature can reach its full maximal drop, essentially.
Gotcha. Yeah, personally, I've always hated pajamas, any type of pajamas, because I just burn up at night. So
Oh yeah,
that makes sense to me.
same here. Going back to our primal roots.
Right, right. So I've had this app on my phone for quite a while called Sleep Cycle. Have you heard of it?
I have. I've heard of quite a few of those. Is that one that you keep on your bedside?
Exactly. Keep it on the side, and then it wakes you up. You say when you want to wake up, and then it wakes you up within a 30-minute range. And so I wanted to ask you, what is that? What's their theory there? Because I anecdotally, when I have used that app, I feel much better when I wake up. It's not like, oh my God, I have to fucking wake up. I actually feel rested, and it seems like it's waking me up at a good point.
So in terms of it determining how much non-REM sleep or REM sleep you have, because that's what a lot of these apps are marketing, right? That in and of itself is complete BS. Mm-hmm. However, the principle of it, of staying with a regimented routine sleep schedule, is the primary benefit of these apps. So it's no different than like 10 years ago, before all this technology, of people being asked by a sleep clinician to keep a sleep diary, reporting when you're going to sleep, how much you're sleeping. People, we're goal-oriented people, and we need some type of external stimulus or external source in order for us to make sure that we're sleeping enough. Mm-hmm. So it is good in that regard. But in terms of like everything else about the time window, sure, I will say that we know that if you're waking up after a cycle of REM sleep in the morning, that you are going to perform better biologically the next day than if you woke up from a state of non-REM sleep. But these apps, they say they're measuring that. They actually aren't, because it's not like there's no empirical way to test it. That you don't have any type of like brain activity being measured. And even if they're measuring body movements, that in and of itself is not enough to determine if you're in non-REM sleep or REM sleep.
Gotcha. Well, even if it's just placebo effect, it works for me.
Yeah,
but now I don't keep my phone in my room, so I can't take advantage of it.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough about like putting your phone on do not disturb, or just leaving it outside of the room. It's amazing to me. I mean, I'm a night owl, and there's a few times where I'll text friends late at night thinking that they have their do not disturb function on, and I get a text back right away, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to answer. Why are you answering?
Yeah, my biggest thing is I would just like grab the phone first thing in the morning, and it would completely fuck up my state of mind. I would try to go and meditate and do all this stuff after, but I've already got my mind full of a million different things, social media, emails, etc. And I just didn't want any of that. So,
do you meditate?
Oh yeah, daily.
That's awesome. So I could talk a lot about that. This woman that I worked for at Brown, her name is Willoughby Britton, and she actually worked with Nepalese monks and studied their sleep. Actually, she just studied their brain activity. Their brain activity is astounding. They can actually trigger sleep-like states while they're completely awake. And that's one thing that, as this research on meditation has progressed over the years and looking at changes in brain activity, it seems that the more often you practice meditation, the more often you could physically and like consciously change your brain activity to be in like a sleep-like or rest-like state, which is so fascinating and cool to me. So that's awesome you're doing that.
Thank you. I had Dr. Leslie Sherlin on here. He's a neuroscientist that does a lot of like neurofeedback for the Seahawks and some other organizations. And he talked a little bit about that, about obviously neurofeedback is kind of training yourself to induce different kinds of brain waves. So that would be consistent with what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's I can't emphasize that. And have you ever heard of the like Wim Hof breathing?
Of course. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing that over the past year and a half with our training program.
Mm-hmm.
That's been phenomenal too.
Nice.
I don't meditate, but I do practice Wim Hof in the morning on a daily basis.
That's awesome. What are your thoughts on like other models of sleep, such as polyphasic sleep? And for those of you who don't know that, there's like rumors of say like Kobe Bryant sleeping for 2 hour blocks, and then other people sleeping for like 6 30-minute blocks throughout the day.
Yeah, I know. I love Tim Ferriss, but that sleep hacking is just, it's awful. Mainly because you're never going to get non-REM sleep. So, I will give him credit. It is ingenious in terms of how he was able to verse himself in the biology of sleep and then apply that to some like real life skill. But the problem with that sleep is that you're only sleeping around times when REM sleep is favored. So the idea is that whenever you have these dips in core body temperature throughout the day, that's when you should be sleeping. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're only getting REM sleep, what's going to happen when you, over months and years, are compromising your non-REM sleep? You're not going to get the release of anabolic growth hormones, growth hormone, testosterone, insulin growth factor. And honestly, when you deviate from that schedule, your body is going to be so jacked up that you probably will lose like years on your life and like years of work, because it's going to take you that much longer to recover from doing that to your body.
Mm-hmm. From a hormone standpoint.
Yeah, from a hormone standpoint, and then just like a general recovery standpoint too, because like during non-REM sleep, like your brain is pretty much shut off. It's not like dead to the world, but it does, like the nerve cells in your brain take turns essentially going offline to rest themselves. And so you need non-REM sleep, the polyphasic sleep. Like I said, hypothetically it's intriguing, but it would never work in the long term.
Gotcha. How about naps? I know that you personally don't take naps, but how beneficial are they and why?
I don't take naps because some people, and this is true with research too, some people who nap can't recover for the rest of the day after a nap. I'm one of those people. What's interesting, though, is that those same people like me, we are extremely resilient to sleep deprivation. So I could stay up all night. I could stay up 2 nights, and I can perform almost just as well as being fully rested. I'm one of those, biological anomalies. And what's funny is I have a few other friends in sleep research who are the same. But besides us, napping for anywhere from 20 to an hour a day, 20 minutes to an hour a day, is very beneficial for all types of memory performance. So again, talking about this motor skill, performance, remembering information, even just giving your body like a 20-minute downtime throughout the chaos in a day. There's tons of physiological benefits to it. It also depends on who you are.
Gotcha. I'm one of those that usually just can't fall asleep. My mind is too active to fall asleep in the middle of the day, but I've tried it at various points, especially training for the games, and it is actually very helpful regardless of if I can fall asleep, for sure.
Yeah. There's a few times that I have napped. Typically I'm extremely exhausted and didn't sleep much. Not the night before, but maybe that week prior. But it's amazing how much of biology, I can make all these generalizations, but at the end of the day, that everyone has their own individual needs, which is exactly like the type of model that we're gravitating towards with our research, is focusing more on the individual and using just tons of research on all aspects of biology to predict how that individual will perform and to essentially micromanage their schedule.
Right. So I know you already talked a little bit about it. You did research in your undergrad on alcohol and cocaine on sleep and recovery. Can you talk about what effects alcohol has on sleep?
Yeah, so that was for my PhD.
Oh, okay.
But
Perfect.
it's all related. So we were using animal models to look at how binge drinking and as well as like chronic social intake of alcohol affected how active animals were throughout the day. So how frequently they would run on their wheels, which mice and hamsters love to do. What time they would go to sleep, what time they would wake up, and then how they would respond to environmental stimuli like light. Because it's well known that if you present a mouse or a hamster with light in the middle of the night, that you could actually delay or advance their sleep rhythms and their sleep patterns by hours the next day and thereafter. So basically, alcohol entirely shuts off that system from working. I won't get into the neurochemistry of it, but it affects the system in a way where it can't respond to these environmental stimuli, which, hypothetically could work if you're traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast on a red eye, and then you're traveling back the next day. Like if you didn't want to be jet lagged, all you would have to do would be wasted the entire time, and your biological clock system would never shift. But, not the average person, the average mammal, like they can't deal with that. So yeah, in that aspect of timing, it completely jacks it up and makes the body entirely insensitive to external light and external cues. Now, in terms of the sleep, it's been shown that, obviously, when you have alcohol, it favors sleep. It's a happy medium. So if you have too much, it could actually make you hyperactive. But for the most part, alcohol is a sedative and it helps you to fall asleep. The problem with alcohol, though, is once that alcohol is metabolized from your body, your brain is wired to be in a state of wakefulness. So that's typically the biggest issue is like people who drink, they have no issues falling asleep. They just can't stay asleep. And so therefore they get less sleep.
Okay, gotcha. And that's even the case on an acute, say, one night deal, right? Okay.
One night deal, and then over time, the system gets trained and rewires itself to behave like that in the long term. And of course, withdrawal is the worst. Like that's really, even in animal models that go through withdrawal, like that's where you see the worst sleep patterns. And obviously now we know in humans that complaints of sleep during withdrawal need to be paid attention to because that will predict the risk and rate of relapse.
Gotcha. What about marijuana and sleep and recovery? How is that affected similarly, differently? How so?
There actually hasn't been much research done, mostly because it's a class 4 regulated drug. So it's meaning that it's much easier to get a drug approved study for cocaine and heroin and morphine to be done in humans and in animals than marijuana, mostly because it's a recreational drug, and also our government takes the stigma for the most part still of marijuana and government is still pretty great. But what we do know is, at least in animal models, that marijuana has a very similar effect as alcohol and cocaine in that it actually stops the biological clock and the timing system from responding to external stimuli. So that's like a pretty common theme with all these drugs, is that they stop the system from responding to external cues.
So again, that kind of means it may help you fall asleep, but it may affect your quality of sleep throughout the night.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about your work with military. I'm wondering, because a lot of those guys have such terrible demands on their sleep schedule. As do firefighters, right? They're woken up at all hours of the night by a fucking screaming bell. Are there any theories out there? Or do you have any knowledge of strategies that these guys can take to, I don't know, mitigate the issues that are caused by this kind of thing?
Well, what's interesting is we seem to think that people who are extremely resilient to stuff like that tend to be pre-selected for these types of positions. So if they're woken up in the middle of the night by a siren, they tend to be the type that will fall asleep quickly again. So there's that in and of itself. But the main thing is just creating a sleep-friendly environment, meaning minimize light as much as possible. I don't know the setup of most fire stations, and certainly, on active military bases, it is not meant to be a sleep-friendly environment. So if you do things like wear a sleep mask or wear earplugs, that's in those types of situations and environments, that would be the easiest way.
Gotcha. What's the current bleeding edge science on getting over jet lag, including sleep stuff, earthing, all that kind of stuff?
Obviously you can drink yourself into not getting jet lag, but that wouldn't work for most people. I think the biggest thing is timing your routine with when light is available. So a lot of times people who take red eyes to Europe, it's better to not sleep and to essentially overload your, as we call, sleep pressure or sleep system, overload the fact that you've been awake for so long. That's one strategy you can use, because when you actually go to sleep, your body isn't going to care if it's light out or if it's dark out. It just wants to sleep. So yeah, that's one strategy. A lot of people use bright light therapy, meaning they before they travel, they'll progressively delay the time they go to sleep and delay the time they wake up. That's something that we kind of suggest for the professional and collegiate athletes I work with. But even that's not foolproof because of their travel schedule. Especially with baseball players, they're traveling all the time. They're a unique population. I could, spend another hour talking about them alone. But yeah, use light to your advantage. That's pretty much the best advice I could give.
Awesome. Where do you think the sleep technology is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years, such as neurofeedback stuff being available to the general population?
Well, we already see this idea that, you were talking about the sleep cycle of these apps that are supposed to predict when you should wake up based on which state of sleep you're in. The next thing I think is there's probably going to be apps that will say that they can predict your dream content, and to using your dream content to make decisions about your life. Just because there apparently are these neuroscientists in Japan who have nicely correlated certain brain states and fluctuations in brain activity with dream content, and have apparently develop some fancy logarithm to determine dream content. So that's where I think it's going to go. But it goes back to regardless of what apps are becoming or are developing, it's all about having a goal and setting a sleep goal. And so if these apps help you do that, regardless if they don't do anything else that they claim to do, that's totally fine.
So one day, do you think we're going to be able to record and watch our dreams?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know how much validity would be behind that because,
Right.
you know, that's the skeptical scientist in me. But I do think that technology will be available one day, 100%.
That's exciting and scary at the same time.
I know.
We're not in control of it.
Talk about a complete invasion of privacy. Like, it's already crazy. You know that Venmo app? That app creeps me out that you could see like all these transactions.
That's the weird part. Yeah, you just turn that on private. Just turn that on private. Like, I don't get that. I don't understand that part. It's weird.
I don't either. I don't either. My friend, out of embarrassment, he like wrote something ridiculously inappropriate in terms of like our money transaction the other day. So I was like, and I didn't even know about it until then. It's like, oh my gosh, Kevin, thank you.
Yeah. So you kind of opened up a can of worms with the dreams. Is there any validity to people saying what specific kinds of dreams mean, like water means emotion and stuff like that? Do you know anything about that?
No, Freud's stuff has sort of been left aside on its own accord. Like, there might be a few sleep researchers that still do like significance of dream content, but they're pretty far and few nowadays, at least in our field. Just so you know, I have my branch meeting in 5 minutes, so might have to do one more question. Yeah.
Let's see. So you got 5 minutes. What do you know about? Do you know anything about how feelings affect performance and recovery? Positive and negative feelings affect it, kind of from a neurochemical standpoint.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the big three neurochemicals of feelings and performance are serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. I actually have dopamine tattooed on my arm. It's the the neurochemical of pain and pleasure. Those three determine most emotional states, how adaptive animals are to stress, how adaptive they are to other animals and social situations in their environment. They're also the three the three neurochemicals that regulate sleep. So quality of sleep as well as quantity of sleep. It's all connected. There's no question that there's an intimate relationship between neurochemical release, how animals behave and respond and feel in their environment, and how well they sleep at night.
Gotcha. Well, it looks like that's going to be our next topic. I want to, next time we get you on, I want to learn how people can take advantage of that kind of knowledge. Before we wrap up, what do you want people to know about, and where can they find you?
So I have a popular science book that I wrote 3 years ago called Meathead: Unraveling the Athletic Brain. I talk a lot about sleep strategies that athletes can use to gain a performance edge. I also talk a bit about essentially why athletes are pretty freaking smart and elite. Sort of by debunking this idea of the dumb jock. That was something I was definitely confronted with in college. So I would greatly appreciate it if you bought Meathead: Unraveling the Athletic Brain, and I promise you'll gain some aspect of changing your current training regimen from it. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at DocJockZZZ, or you can just shoot me an email. It's allison.brager@gmail.com.
I like that Instagram handle. It's very concise and puts all three of your things in there.
Well, I actually changed it. It used to be Beastly Balter, which was my nickname in college. And then I did a ESPN radio interview when I was doing work with the LSU football team during the preseason. And they made fun of me, so I changed it.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, guys, if you want to stay up to date with all the video content that we're putting out, blog articles, free programming, et cetera, go to brutestrengthtraining.com and sign up for our newsletter. Doc, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, thank you. And we can definitely have much more, topics of conversation in the future.
Sounds
I love
great.
talking about this stuff.
Sounds great. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye.